What goes on, my friends?
Hello, everybody.
Hello. I love that we had a little box to do the counting for us, and we had
See?
We
way
were just
more
talking about
time.
that.
We were just complaining. We don't have to count.
Yeah.
This is what AI is supposed to be used for. Where
Right.
we take the labor from ourselves and off.
The fact that that's not even AI.
but it could be.
Yeah. I was gonna say.
Where's your use your imagination? Come on.
Right. I mean, just like how we were talking about that we don't know we can't count, we don't know numbers or anything like that. That's why, for the most part, we're all communists, because we just need help. We don't understand how to be bourgeois, how to be a capitalist. Please tell me.
Look,
I'm
if I
very
understood
scared.
if I understood it, I probably wouldn't be a communist because I would be doing much better right now. An individual.
Exactly.
The world would probably be doing horribly, but I myself, personally, would be doing amazing.
Well, I'm actually really good at math. What the fuck did I go? Where did I go wrong?
No.
Apparently, you weren't
become
that good.
like a venture capitalist or something like that.
Shit.
Have you tried not being before?
Simply just try. Just try. How about topically, just don't live where other people want to move their shit into. How about that?
Yeah.
Because really, at the end of the day, Israel is just a big landlord. So this is Kollective Podcast episode whatever. I don't even know anymore. And we have the one and only, truly, James Ray, or James Getspolitical.
Howdy, everybody.
What's going on? How are you?
Hello. I'm hanging in. Been a week or so now.
It's been a decade.
Been a decade, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think we can all attest to the fact that we're all just emotionally exhausted. I really don't know what else to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So it just keeps getting worse. And I was actually thinking about that earlier, where I feel like when I was less politically involved or just like younger, like you would hear about crises, like for example, like in DPRK they bombed South Korea. The tensions are rising, and then things kind of just like settle down. But I'm only actively seeing things get worse. And it's in my analysis at this point that a regional war is on the horizon, and it's coming if it hasn't already started. But I think most of the people already know. That's kind of like what I think. So, James, what do you think? Who are you? What are you doing here? How did you get into this political?
These are good questions. We got.
Who left the door open?
Some loaded ass questions, Ivan. Jesus.
Right. Write down your.
What
name
do I think? Yeah.
Who do you work for?
What's my social security number? Mother's maiden.
Like, this is a job interview. Tell me about yourself, James.
What do you see yourself in 5 years?
Oh fuck, I don't know. Like.
Right.
Trying to figure out the month by month at this point. Honestly, yeah. We're living in like a period of crisis. It's awesome.
Just constant.
What's that old Lenin quote, right? That there's decades where weeks happen and weeks where decades happen.
Yep.
Or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, like we're living in that time. It is. It's a good quote. One of many good quotes from Lenin. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, broadly, like, hi, I'm James. I do like political commentary and stuff on TikTok, as well as like Twitter, doing primarily social media work, trying to basically just do advocacy for myriad issues. As of late, it's been primarily Palestine, more than just like because of the recent news, but just, broadly, it's been an area I've devoted more and more time and focus to over the years. It's kind of turned into something like the one thing. I'm like a very one-trick pony kind of communist. Like, I can tell you a fuck ton about Israeli occupation. That's about it. But I can tell you about everything through it.
No, I know you mean. Somebody asks you like a different question. They're like, "Well, can you tell me about Hocha?" And you're like, "I don't even. I don't know what to say."
I like bunkers and shit, man. I don't know.
Yeah, that's like the other day. Cutie and Larry were talking in the Discord about like older Russian history, and I was just checked out. I was kind of like, yeah.
Half the time, y'all will say something. I'll just be like, I'm gonna have to look this up. I cannot join this conversation.
Right.
Honestly, it's valid. I mean, like, it's funny too, because like Palestine wasn't even the area that I really tried to hone in on and focus in on when I was in college. Like a lot of so I had like a poli-sci and econ degree, And like the studying that I ended up doing for like kind of an IR track was more geared towards like the post-Yugoslavian sphere. And Palestine kind of just fell into my lap more so as a result of just personal circumstance, just meeting the right people essentially over the years. I can also tell you a lot about Bosnia and shit if you ever want.
We'll save it for when you come back.
Yeah, but
the Bosnian episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a lot of overlap between Bosnians and Palestinians in a lot of ways. It's really interesting, especially in the Yugoslavian dissolution in the 90s. You know, Chetniks and Zionists have a lot of things in common, weirdly. Who knew? It's like fascists flock together or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I basically spent the last couple of years just doing political commentary, trying to do like actively organizing in my communities as well that I've been living in. But you know, TikTok really took off. You know, I'm too ADHD to do long form YouTube content, so like short, like 5 to 10 minute videos are great for me. And I've just been using that as basically a way of kind of engaging with audiences that I think traditionally didn't really get a lot of information on international relations. You know, I started off on TikTok as sort of a liberal on all things but Palestine. That changed really quickly. I mean, I wasn't really liberal when I got on, but I had no way of contextualizing my beliefs, so I kind of just like fell back to liberal talking points. And as I kind of developed more as like a Marxist-Leninist, it shifted out a bit, especially like 2020 with the pandemic and the uprisings then in the U.S. But yeah, that's I guess my like shortened backstory. I like politics. I get political or whatever the hell, right?
Right.
Is that what your username means?
Yeah, Jamesgetspolitical. I'll be honest with you, it was just because when I the funny thing about my username is like I just like utter lack of creativity when I was trying to make my TikTok initially over quarantine, and I was like, fuck it, this seems like it makes sense. Like my first videos, actually, I think I deleted them, but like my initial videos were just me like tending to a small like cayenne pepper garden that I had on my porch. And I was like making videos about that, and I ended up making this like 15-second rant about like I think mission trips being like neocolonial endeavors or some shit. And it popped off, and I was like, "Oh, like TikTok can do politics? That's interesting."
I think I remember that.
Just started kind of doing that. Yeah, it was weird.
Same for me. I started off doing just like Warhammer nerdy stuff and
Hell
like
yeah.
a couple of like some like movie stuff, horror movie stuff with my first TikTok account, and then I came across. I think everybody's familiar with Left of the Projector podcast, Evan, and like that was like, oh shit, there's commies on here too. All right,
Yeah,
I got led down a rabbit hole. Thanks, Evan.
Yeah, we always shout out Evan, and he hasn't been on here yet. We really gotta rectify that situation.
I feel like we've all been on his, but
yeah. See, I was just a long time lurker. Resisted TikTok in the beginning, where I was just like, no, that shit's not for me, the most masculine man in the world. And then I fell into that pretty crazy. I feel like TikTok used to be a lot funnier, but then that was not when I was nearly as political. So that's the algorithm. Yeah, and then I saw people actually talking about communism, and I was like, oh shit. So like there's more to it than just like memes and like dictatorship or whatever. Fell down that rabbit hole. Met these guys, saw them do a podcast episode with Evan without me, and I got upset about it. And I was like, I want to be popular. And then Cutie Pie gathered all of us together, and now here we are.
Hell yeah.
So, exactly. So, you know, in your experience of talking politics, was there like any particular moment in the time you've been studying this conflict or this apartheid regime against Gaza that really made you be like, this is something that I need to hone in on? Or was it just the whole situation in general?
I mean, it's actually kind of silly. My first like real, like when I was in high school, I had a friend of mine, and we had really kind of studied like Middle Eastern politics as best as you can as like a white high schooler in Southern Indiana. And just trying to get an idea of like what was going on in the region, because like it just seemed like a lot of the courses I was taking were kind of covering it in a really like stupid way, and I couldn't for the life of me understand why that is at the time. And so I was digging into more like just like general regional politics. And when I was a freshman in college, one of my good friends, so I ended up making a friend with him because I was actually at a party, and he was in the same circles I was in at that point. And he comes in and, you know, jokingly, you know, he said, I was like, oh, where are you from? Because he had a bit of an accent. He's like, oh, I'm from East Jerusalem. I was like, I'm Palestinian. And I was a little, I think I was like a little buzzed at the time, and I was like, oh, that's sick, fuck Israel, right? And he was like, yeah. And so like I said it like borderline jokingly, and then I ended up like sitting with him for like an hour or two, kind of chatting about it. We ended up becoming like best friends, and I'm still in touch with him. He's like family to me. And so he and his family, who were over where I was initially, like kind of we ended up building a really serious connection. And then I ended up transferring schools up to Purdue, which is where I ended up graduating from. And it, I guess, just kind of stuck periodically. It was just always an issue that was personal, because like it wasn't even like rooted in ideological things. It was just like, oh, my friend fucking hates them and has a lot of horror stories about the IDF, so I hate them by extension. And then like, yeah. Well, I was like, my friend said fuck Israel, so I said fuck Israel, and I was like, that's fair, right? And then I think as I started developing ideologically, understanding like, settler colonialism, getting a better like kind of Marxist analysis on the national question, things of that nature, you start realizing like, okay, like it's more than just like a government that's bad. It's like this entire system is like fundamentally flawed and objectively like full of contradictions that are going to like lead to horrific atrocities. Yeah. And that got me digging in more towards like the history. My now, girlfriend was huge early on like suggesting books and stuff. I started buying my own books towards like my junior year of college, because I was like, well, hell, I have an idea of what I'm talking about, but I would like to know more. And so the more I read, the more I was like, wow, this is like unequivocally just fucked. I was like, wow, this is really irredeemable. And like it just kind of kept leading me down rabbit holes. And the more I read, the more I talked about it to people that I was like that were following me at the time. I was primarily talking about domestic politics at that point. It was like 2020, so it was like in the heat of Trump and everything else. And so that was a big thing. But like, my followers were receptive to it, and I was like, well, I kind of have a lot of opinions on this. I want to flesh it out. And as I met more communists, more Palestinians, I started getting more involved with it, and that's developed into like more of an actual academically fleshed out opinion that I do a lot of organizing. I've been organizing for Palestinian liberation for years now, with myriad groups, and also just like doing a lot more academic research on my own, trying to basically flesh out opinions so that I can talk about them more intelligently. And that's kind of turned into a lot of what I do, just reporting on the ground news, current events, things like that, countering propaganda, because there's a lot of it, and just trying to give a more fleshed out perspective on things, going to like deeper analytical things. I try to make sure that it's like accessible, but like a lot of it I just try to like dig into and talk about. So,
Yeah. I mean, you certainly do an excellent job at it. I mean,
thank you.
When we started mentioning to people, like, because we didn't say it right away because we wanted to make sure everything was going to like happen. We started saying, oh yeah, this is James, and people were like, oh my god, James, like like people really like your stuff, and we do too.
That makes me happy. I'm glad that people get something out of it. I make it more so, I think, because I just feel crazy. In Islam, there's this principle, right, that if like you see something bad that is happening, you act to stop it. If you can't act to stop it, then you speak out against it, right? And so for me, it's like, well, I can't go over to Palestine, so I guess like best I can do is videos and things.
I mean, that's also that's good advice for anyone living within the imperial core. It's just like, because there's this sense of, I want to go over there, I want to help out, I want to like be a medic, supplies, pick up arms and join the fight itself, and it's just not realistic to do that. And it's like, well, there's always the question, what can I do? And it's really as simple as, if someone says something, you speak out and say, absolutely not. I've been purging my friends lists on like Facebook. I just put up, do you condemn Israel? And the ones that have said no or messaged me no, I just instantly get rid of them and speak up against it, because that's all we can really do here. Same with TikTok. It's just, where do you fall?
Yeah.
No, exactly. It's not something that can manifest some sense of neutrality. There is an objectively correct path here, and that is liberation of Palestine. And it's crazy seeing people fall for the same type of propaganda that happened in 1990 in Iraq, and then 2003 for Iraq. It's just like blatant lies that are not verified. And liberals, they eat this stuff up, and their negligence to educate themselves or to be open to the other side of who they're being told are enemies is leading to genocide right now as we speak, as we do the show. And it's sickening. It really is.
No, for sure. I mean, like, there's just this broad dehumanization of Palestinians that's been existing for, even well before this, like decades upon decades of groundwork has gone into this. Like, and that's, liberals are really quick to eat a lot of it up because liberals in their analysis of like the colonial like struggle don't understand like the idea of violence, don't understand the idea like how settler colonialism functions. They just see it as like a binational conflict. And the issue you run into there as well, then you're like, oh, well, shit, like everything happens in a vacuum, violence bad. So I like, everybody should be able to defend themselves. And it's like, not my fault. It's a really shallow analysis in liberal circles. And it's coupled by like just rabid Islamophobia that's really been heightened since 2001. Like you said, like a lot of the rhetoric you see today even is really reminiscent of like it's rhetoric you saw in 2001 to 2003. It's actually kind of funny that Israeli propaganda really hasn't evolved past 2001. It really like they're playing like they play on these kind of similar tropes, like, and it's interesting. Like it's annoying because like you watch people fall for it and you're like, hey fuckers, do you not remember like like we all complain about like Iraq being a major blunder, but then the Israelis are talking about beheading kids or whatever the fuck, and like all of a sudden everyone's like, whoa, we gotta like get engaged. It's like, all right, holy shit.
It's that classic okay, yeah, we know Iraq was a blunder. We know they lied to us. We know this was a blunder and such and such. But this time it's probably true. This time it's correct. This time we have to act.
If we don't act, then it's even worse.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
We gotta get in there, damn it.
No, exactly. We saw the same thing with the NATO Ukraine war, or sorry, the NATO Russian war, where we have to do something now. We have to act. But ironically, this time I made a video about it this morning. I remember when that war finally escalated 2 years ago, and there were so many videos, particularly people from England packing bags and going over to join the freedom fighters, whatever. And now you don't see that at all. But in those propaganda videos where people were saying we're fighting against injustice and genocide or whatever, well, that's happening right now. So what's the difference now? Well, I mean, we can speculate about what that difference is. Cruz got it.
Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, they said it in those CNN clips where they said you don't see this in white countries,
Yeah,
and they're literally talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's a genocide. But I wanted to talk about that speech you gave the other day. On TikTok. You mind if I play it real quick?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Cool. Because it's a really good speech anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So you guys see it?
Nope.
No.
Can't. No.
Oh no! What happened?
You gotta present it, bud.
I know. I tried. All right. Let's see.
I believe in you.
Thanks, buddy. I was only able to do it before. Right.
Hey, since we're gonna cut this lead up out, I can say some of my
Yeah, go for it.
All right, go Unhinged.
Oh yeah.
No, Unhinged Larry's not good. Yeah. Wow, what's up, Larry? What are you gonna say?
That's it. I just
Oh, that's you Unhinged.
Yeah, for today.
Just a little
I don't know what
statement,
you mean.
For now.
Oh yeah.
You gotta love technical difficulties. You gotta find like a sound clip to put on for like the editing process.
Now it's up.
Oh yeah. You can hear me fumbling through it initially.
There's no audio, but we've got the thing on the screen.
Oh my goodness.
It's on the screen at least.
All right, you know what?
Well,
okay, so
in the meantime, so I actually have not seen this clip or this speech at all. Where did that happen?
Oh, I was out in Philly.
Take it away, James.
Philly?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like a local like protest I was at, and I do some work with some of the organizing coalitions in a couple of different cities and states actually. But like Philly, I was like, well, yeah, I'll go in, and they were like, we need extra speakers, and I was like, okay, sure, fuck it, like, I was like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So I wrote it on my phone and then just like jumped on up, because that was like at the time, that was right as the kind of repression was starting, right? It was like a day, I think, after 2 days after the initial surprise attack, which was awesome in a lot of ways, but like the kind of initial breakout of Gaza, and so it was more so talking about like standing in solidarity with resistance fighters, etc. Now, of course, that's become more complicated as propaganda takes root, as different things start occurring, as news stories erupt. But stay la vie, right? It's just the way things are sometimes. But yeah, it was a fun speech. I basically was talking about like the history of Israeli colonialism, and talking about how like what we saw, the breakout of the Gaza Strip by a myriad actors, right? By a number of resistance groups in the Gaza Strip, is really kind of been decades in the making, right? Resulted from Israeli colonial policy, not just in the Gaza Strip, but like the entirety of historic Palestine, right? These like, people say 75 years, which I think is, better than the alternative of like saying like 50 something years. But like, realistically, like Zionist colonization goes back to like 1882 or 1888. And, you see this, like these just like horrific foundational elements of violence, and you see Palestinian resistance every step of the way to that violence, looking at 1936 and 1939, like massive revolts across historic Palestine. You see it in the Intifadas. There's periods, of course, between all of that period where there is active resistance to colonization, annihilation, etc. But Gaza, kind of giving like a brief history lesson for people who aren't like engaged with it. Gaza was under like Israeli colonial oppression for years upon years. 70% of Gaza's population, about 2/3, about 70%, are actually refugees from 1948. In 1947 and 1948, it's really longer in my opinion, but like the broad consensus is like those 2 years were what Palestinians call the Nakba, or the catastrophe. What that essentially was a mass series of ethnic cleansing campaigns that culminated in the ethnic cleansing of like 750,000 plus Palestinians from like 520 cities, towns, and villages. And a lot of the refugees in that area fled to Gaza and ended up actually there. It's why there's so many refugee camps actually in the Gaza Strip that are comprised of like thousands upon thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, realistically, in all of these camps. And so it kind of becomes what one might consider to be like a cradle of resistance in historic Palestine, right? You have several of them. You have like Jenin, you have Nablus, you have Gaza. Like kind of the big three contemporarily, and you start seeing this development of like resistance to Zionist colonization. Zionists obviously understand this, so there's like a period of attempted wiping out or restructuring through mass violence of like refugee camps and systems for a number of years. During the Second Intifada, during the 67 wars, Israel comes to basically occupy all of the 1967 territories, so East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza. In 73, when the Egyptians and Syrians liberate parts of historic Palestine, as well as Golan Heights and parts of the Golan Heights and Sinai Peninsula, you see Gaza kind of become like quasi-liberated. In like 2005, 2006, the Israeli PM negotiates with like resistance fighters who had been like doing targeted strikes against Israeli targets in the Gaza Strip, and basically comes to this agreement where the settlers and the IDF will pull out, which happens in 2005, 2006. Since then, Gaza has been under a total air, land, and sea blockade, which some people describe as an open-air prison, some describe as a concentration camp. I think it's worth getting into the nuances of both of the descriptions. I appreciate. I'm glad someone commented. I'm glad they're here. They're thanking me for that. I'm glad you kind of helped teach something. Sorry, I got off track. I was on a fucking roll.
Yeah, you were. I was like, keep going.
Yeah. But basically, like you end up going under this like total air, land, and sea blockade, which turns Gaza into an open air prison or a concentration camp where Israel is constantly testing munitions. What that means is like systematically bombing residential buildings, mosques, schools, hospitals, sanitation facilities, and it causes like this abject worsening of conditions in an area that like is the size of like 2 Washington DCs, so like not that big. Smaller than like Philadelphia. I think it's like the size of Boston, right? Maybe. And it's got like 2.something million people, 2.3, 2.4. The aggregate age or the average age is like 18. Like about 47 to 50% of the population is under the age of 18. Those estimates range from like 47 to 54. you get like, because so many people are getting killed off, because there's just like not, there's so much horrific violence. And over the years, there's been like multiple flare-ups. There's numerous, like I think 5 or 6 in total, where you see like a more and more death than normal. What you could consider wars, what Israel considers like limited defensive military operations that are by no means defensive in any way, that have led to the deaths of like I think more than like 10,000 Palestinians in total. Like I think like 5 or 6,000 in the Gaza Strip since like the early 2000s. The mass maiming and injuring of countless more Gazans in 2018. Well, I say Gazans, the Palestinians in Gaza, most of them are refugees. They tried to do what was called like the March of Return, which was like a peaceful protest against the wall that had been established in the land route. They ended up going up to that wall in a series of marches and protests that for like a year or so were just trying to like bring attention to the wall, tear it down. It was all peaceful, Of course, there was like momentary, like little sporadic little things going on, but it was by and large a largely peaceful operation. And Israel responded with just slaughtering people in mass. Like, you had over 200 people dead, like 30-something thousand injured, I believe. About 100 plus ambulances were targeted and shot at, like mass injuries. And a lot of Israeli snipers were like specifically targeting medics, press, maiming people very specifically. Which is also just really a horrific element of Israel's occupation, is it acts as a mass disabling event in a lot of ways. But post that, you start seeing, more and more armed resistance coming out. Now, you have a lot of actors that, could start in like 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, depending on the resistance faction you're talking about. But they cumulatively kind of operate in tandem to realistically defend Gaza from total from total capitulation to the Israeli settler colonial project. And we saw a couple of days ago was like a really phenomenal operation in which they were able to break out of this prison and actually liberate territory in what's called the 48 territories for the first time in decades. A lot of the settlements that they were able to go in and take prisoners of and whatever, were settlements that were established atop ethnically cleansed Palestinian villages in the 1940s. There's a lot of really interesting video content of like Palestinians that are like kids or whatever, or like older adults who are like leaving the walls and they're like crying because it's the first time they stepped foot on their home soil in like a generation, right? And many people in the Gaza Strip have like never left. It's very hard to get out. It's very hard to get in unless you're Israeli. Due to the apartheid structures and the limited entrances. There's only a couple of entrances in Gaza that are more regularly than not closed. And, what airstrips did exist in the Gaza Strip, the airstrips that were built as a part of the Oslo II arrangements have been completely bombed and bulldozed. So it's fucked, in short.
It's fucked. I think that's one of the major things that liberals can't conceptualize, is that these people can't just like leave. It's not like they're being stubborn and what. No, like they're running, as we saw on the news, they're running away from bombs, being told go down this route, and then getting bombed when they go down that route. Like there's no escape. It's just death. And liberals really can't seem to understand exactly.
They fundamentally cannot consider historical realities and how things got there. They can only think in the moment,
right? And
in the moment, all they saw is some people of a country that were supposed to like got attacked. Right. That's all they see. Exactly. After that, it shuts off.
They listen to everything. They listen to literally everything that comes out of MSNBC, CNN, etc. Like all the time. Like it's like the only thing you can really be agreeing with conservatives on is that like liberals really do just like fucking inhale.
Yeah.
like they just can't stop themselves from just like taking in that sweet propaganda at all times.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, for sure.
They're huffing that MSNBC seriously.
It's an epidemic. It really is. It may sound silly, but when you started to hear about what happened when the Operation Hamas pulled off was in effect, did you immediately understand the implications? Because for me, I was at work. I'm always at work, and I stopped to check on my phone, and it was actually your story of the Palestinian glider. And I was like, what is this? And then you elaborated.
What is happening?
And I immediately hit the
like one of the
Discord,
sickest
and I
things
was
I've
like,
ever seen.
guys, what is happening? I was like, at a Call of Duty, like,
Yeah.
what an absolute Chad, mad lads. Like,
this is a side note. One of my favorite things to come out of the first day was the amount of like Americans and like just white dudes that are like in the comment sections of these videos who are like hyped up about it because they just thought it was funny that like they were paragliding in. Like this is a country, this is a military force that doesn't have an air force, that is paratrooping into Israeli territory.
Yeah, for real.
It's sick. And I say Israeli territory, it's occupied Palestinian land. But like it's funny, you know, and you just like the comments are like, yo, we're dropping guys, like where are we dropping boys? What's going on? Like,
yeah.
Well, that's what you said the other day, Cruz, that it's like Warzone.
I was like, it's literally how Warzone starts, or like a PUBG. I played PUBG a lot more than I did Warzone, and it's the same thing. You come down just on the damn paraglider. I was like, what is happening?
But to your question, like, so the first thing, the really critical distinction too is like it wasn't just Hamas, right? The PFLP, DFLP, PIJ, a lot of organizations work in tandem, which makes it even cooler because there's like actual like active communist insurgents on the ground doing fun shit.
It's a legitimate united front.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I actually noticed that. Not to interrupt you too much, James, but I've noticed. You know, Western media and Israeli media is really, well, that's West, is, you know, just specifically like harping on Hamas, but they're not talking about the PFLP or any of the other groups. And I think they're intentionally doing that because they know us communists are like, and they don't want us to get like,
they don't want to hype us up, bro.
Don't want to get the ideas.
They don't want all the Bernie bros to be like, wait, hold up, that's fucking sick.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
wait, that's an option? We can do that?
Exactly. But
it complicates it. Yeah.
It does. Yeah. But I've seen the footage of PFLP fighters fighting, you know, and I'm like, boys.
And it kind of destroys the narrative. Like if they talk about anybody other than Hamas, it kind of destroys the narrative that they're all just anti-Semites and they're there to get rid of all the, you know, the Jewish people. And
which is funny too. It's funny they say that too because Hamas is like, this is gonna make me sound like I know too much. Hamas is like updated 20.
Yeah, they do. They do have it.
When you read Hamas's charter, they're very clear in their analysis that like the Jewish people they are against are Zionist settlers, right? They clarified it in their 2017 update to their own charter, and which is funny because like nobody fucking reads it, but like, you know, they're like, oh, they mean this, and it's like you gotta like contextually understand where rhetoric comes from, right? But yeah, no, you're right. And the West, to get back on track, in a way that won't have like FBI people showing up at my fucking door tomorrow. Like the interesting thing about like Western propaganda around Palestinian resistance, particularly in Gaza, although the West Bank gets this broad overgeneralization really thrust on them as well, is that like the West really wants to paint all acts of Palestinian resistance as being either like Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is like the PIJ. And the reality of that is like it's way more complicated. For a long time, like the PFLP, which for viewers that maybe don't know what it is, like a Marxist-Leninist organization, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Like the PFLP was one of like the second largest cohort in the PLO for like the longest time until the Israelis started assassinating all their leadership like back a couple of decades back. And you know, it's interesting that history's never covered. The actors are never covered, but I mean that makes sense too from like a liberal media perspective and really an establishment media perspective that just wants to frame like any Palestinian as being some like unthinking, you know, Muslim beast from the Orient, essentially, is what the rhetoric amounts to. And, you know, as a Muslim, I find that very offensive. But also just like as someone with basic common fucking sense, I find it incredibly racist, right? But that's the point, right? Is they want to paint all Palestinian resistance, like you said, as being like, you know, just vile, anti-Semitic, like needless slaughter. When, you know, none of the resistance organizations really operate in a way that like even allows for like sporadic violence that is like unplanned outside of like, you know, some certain situations. Like these operations take an immense amount of planning, and they're very tactical because like, you know, these are people who like if they fuck up, like their lives are on the line. Yeah.
Right.
But that gets wiped away because nuance is like the enemy of media. You know, especially like media that upholds U.S. imperialism. But what was I talking about? I feel like I lost track. But yeah. Fuck
No,
CNN.
it's all right. You're
Like,
good. I do appreciate that you mentioned that you are you know, you are a Muslim, because I myself has started to, you know, explore you know, Islam a little bit, and it's funny because that. Okay, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but from my beginning to understand things in Islam, you know, kind of a lot like dialectics, you know, everything is connected, nothing just happens. So that morning when I was at work, I was listening to like a famous, you know, Islamic speaker, just you know, just talking about life and whatever, and he was talking about, you know, basically like you know, justice and that kind of stuff. And then I went to check TikTok, and it was your video with the paraglider, and I was like, I just said it in the Discord. I was like, guys, this is crazy. Like, there's no way that wasn't all connected. But
you're like, Allah is speaking to me, comrades.
That's the next step. No,
I love that, honestly.
Yeah, but
oh shit,
is that you, Cruz?
That's me. Hang on.
I like the ringtone
right now.
Thank you.
Let's go.
They're here. They're here.
Shit.
Jesus.
But
a rocket flies through your house. They're like, we gave him a warning. We gave him 5 seconds to get out. He should have picked up the phone.
See, that's the problem of using my phone as a webcam, is so I don't if a phone call comes through, I don't know what's happening.
That's too funny. So right now, I guess to reorient ourselves,
yeah.
What do you think is going to happen? Because like obviously we've gone, the point of no return happened a long time ago, but really, you know, in terms of the operation, you know, was successful for what they were trying to gain. Now the world is really looking at this place. It's what everybody's talking about, what we're talking about, obviously. So you know, last couple days, Israel has been bombing, you know, more in Syria, more in Lebanon, and they always do that every couple of weeks, but now they're really ramping it up. Hezbollah has been firing across the border, and then yesterday Iran basically said, you know, as a preemptive move, like, if y'all don't chill, like, we're gonna, you know, we'll get involved, you know, much more seriously. The United States its carrier groups are on the way. Cruz has mentioned to us how he knows people who know, you know, that, you know, not exactly like ship movements. I'm trying to steer this in a way that doesn't sound like Cruz is like a spy, but, you know, basically like, you know, those service people who, you know, are saying like, you know, it looks like, you know, there's movement. So like really, you know, and then one more thing I'll say is, I think it was the president of the Palestinian Authority canceled his meeting with Biden.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you make of all that?
I don't know. I struggle to be predictive in these circumstances because I kind of take it day by day, and I am like fundamentally disconnected from a lot of the on the ground ongoings. There's obviously multiple things that could happen, like worst to best case scenarios, right? You know, we could end up in an entire regional war by tomorrow. It is like very feasible. A lot of the Israeli Hezbollah tit for tat kind of strikes that we've seen in a lot of ways mirror the whole like 2006, 2008 kind of tit for tat stuff that we saw. And it's important to note that like Israel is actually very scared of Hezbollah because they present an actual like very significant threat in a way that is difficult for Israeli military planners to really kind of comprehend. Israel's ground game is really, you know, it's in a lot of ways. It's good to think of the IDF as like a police force with military equipment, right? Yeah. They are really geared towards, and a lot of the early military doctrine, especially pre-2008, I'm not sure if it's updated a whole lot, is really built around suppression of militants with light arms, essentially. So the kind of resistance you get in the West Bank and Nablus in Gaza, even, right? So you're worrying about like rockets, you're worrying about other elements, but fundamentally you have like air supremacy, you have you know, armor supremacy. Like you don't have to worry about a lot of like military style stuff. Hezbollah presents a very different thing. They're a much better armed military with like I think like 100,000 at the top end estimates, 50,000 at the low end estimates members that are active, not including reservists. They have military technological capacity that actually rivals like an actual standing army. And they functionally are a standing military force that are essentially crack guerrilla fighters, which is not what Israel likes, and it's why they got their asses kicked in Lebanon in 2008. But like that, Israeli planners for a long time have kind of maintained that like it's very difficult for them to actually win a two-front war where you have like internal disarray coupled with an actual outside military force. There's a reality in which Hezbollah, something happens like in I think in 2006 or 2008, it was what changed the game was a couple of Hezbollah fighters abducted a couple of IDF soldiers, and that like triggered it, like, right. And we don't know what the trigger will be, right? Right now, they've just been popping rockets and mortars back and forth at each other. Some Hezbollah soldiers have died, become martyrs. Glory to them. And then, in the other end of that, you have Israeli soldiers who have also been killed. Israeli tanks, Merkava tanks that have been like shot at by AGM missiles or AGMs that have been like pretty effective against a lot of their armor. So it's like a tit for tat kind of thing. Yeah. And I've seen some discourse around whether or not that tit for tat is escalatable at this point, like whether or not like there is a red line. Hezbollah, from my understanding, is like kind of stated that their red line is like a ground invasion of Gaza, which strategically makes sense for them, but also I think is a serious red line. From my perspective, right? I could see, I could see that like how Gaza or Iran could see that like, okay, if the resistance in Lebanon can see that like if the resistance in Gaza, the resistance to the West Bank is actually fully pacified, which I don't really think is going to happen. Yeah. But if it's like seriously crippled and a lot of millions of people displaced or what have you, then Israel kind of is going to like, who's the next target, right? It's going to be Lebanon. It's going to be Syria. It's going to be potentially not really Egypt at this point because they're a client state of the U.S. But it'll be like, they're next on the menu in a lot of ways, right? So there's a reality in which Hezbollah gets involved or something happens that escalates it beyond what it already is. If that happens, you likely have probably Iran and the United States mutually arming their go-to people. So the Iranians probably arming and continuing to arm and facilitate with Hezbollah, as well as like the United States continuing to arm and maybe engaging in limited military operations alongside the Israelis. Sure. Where that expands, I don't know, right? It's important to note that like the axis of resistance has really shifted in a lot of ways since the 70s. Jordan has never really been that allied as far as like their government's concerned. The Hashemite regime is its own thing, the monarchy there.
Interestingly enough, real quick, I just confirmed on the TikTok chat with somebody, the Jordanian president also canceled a meeting with Biden.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
I got that right here.
Well, there's also a lot of unrest in Jordan. It's an interesting dynamic that's worth considering is that like in a lot of these countries, the general will or the popular will of the people is not necessarily aligned with their government, right? Mm-hmm. So the Egyptian government and the Egyptian people are radically different. The Jordanian government and the Jordanian people are radically different. Like there's tens of thousands of Jordanians that are out in the streets right now, that are out in front of embassies right now protesting, doing their thing, and God bless all of them. But there is a lot of other things going on. Even in Lebanon, there's factions, right? I mean, Hezbollah is only one of many organizations, for lack of better words, that are operating in Lebanon. Parliamentary wise, they're not even like they're like a top 3 kind of electoral force. So if I recall correctly, so like there's a lot of calculus that goes into it. I will note that the Israelis have also been firing at Lebanese army, like Lebanese army positions, which probably complicates it a little bit, because like you're now just fucking with multiple standing military forces. But Lebanon is itself incredibly complicated in some ways, so it's difficult to analyze how that'll go. You could also see like, a renormalization, for lack of better words, of what is going on. Like, I mean, if Israel is too aggressive in some senses, like this is a constant balance they've had to maintain for years, is, they have to maintain international legitimacy. So how aggressive can they really be before everyone's like, okay, fuck, like we can't really support you anymore? And there's a shot. I mean, I don't think the U.S. will ever back out. I mean, the U.S. will defend them even if they kill every single fucking person in Palestine. But like, it's a matter of like other countries, whether or not they want to get engaged, start boycott, divestment, sanctions, movements, etc. But I don't know. You could see a ground invasion of Gaza. I would be really surprised in some ways about that, because Israel's ground game again isn't great, and their historical record on when they're in regards to ground operations in Gaza is not great.
Well, you saw just the other day they canceled the invasion because it was raining.
Yeah. Well, there's maybe it's like a literal act
they had
of God.
reservists like actually just like deserting.
Wow.
It's actually the rain. It's actually the rain. It's definitely not their guys are just leaving.
So,
James, do you see like a circumstance where like similar like what we've seen with the coup belt and West Africa? Do you see potentially as this escalates, if Egypt or Jordan don't get involved, that their people or their military could coup the government of some kind?
I mean, I don't know. Like we've seen like Arab Spring movements in a lot of these countries back a few years back. Egypt is one of the examples of that. The issue with the Egyptian case is the Egyptian military is very closely aligned with the U.S. because the U.S. kind of gives them all their shit, which is kind of like why the previous government that came out of the Arab Spring movement in Egypt kind of like was overturned and floundered the way it did. There could be unrest that shifts dynamics in some ways, but God only knows. I think the most likely source of interference will be Iran or Lebanon through Lebanon more so.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the United States has been putting 2 carrier fleets in the Mediterranean nearby. It's because they're very keenly aware of that fact. I think it's also why the Israelis haven't really been moving on a ground operation, because they know there's a red line for Hezbollah, and the last thing they want is a committed 2-front war. It's important to note that like that's a lot for them to handle. I think that's why the United States has been so aggressive in how it stepped in, because it knows damn well like what the natural evolution of this goes to. My hope is that the amount of harm to Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank and elsewhere are minimized, and that we can come to a better material situation on the ground for Palestinians. God only knows that that's going to require probably a lot more suffering, a lot more violence for that to occur, and a lot more martyrs on the Palestinian and probably Lebanese side. But we don't know. Like, and that's like what's so difficult about it is like day by day, I'm consistently surprised. Like 3 days ago, I thought Lebanon was literally fucking invading, because like of some like miscommunication on an Israeli alert system. And it turned out to be like fucking pelicans or some shit. But for like 5 minutes, I was like, holy shit, like the entire skies of northern Palestine, northern occupied Palestine are drones. And I was like, oh, fuck, it's happening. But like, we don't know. I think the U.S. military presence is definitely making the calculus a lot more difficult for like Iran and Hezbollah. The carriers are outside of the range in which the missiles in Lebanon can actually reach, so like it presents its own issues. Lebanon does though have like a more committed like anti-aircraft defense kind of network than Gaza in the West Bank, which could present problems, particularly for like Israeli pilots that have a lot of I guess for lack of better words, chutzpah. And they've been doing like low altitude flybys over Lebanese territory. But I don't know if U.S. fighters are stupid enough to do that.
I don't know. So I really don't know. Yeah. Larry, were you gonna ask James something?
So when we talk about the regional differences between the people in Jordan or the people in Egypt, the people in Syria, etc. Like to bring it back to a Marxist analysis of this whole equation, why do you call something like Egypt a client state of the United States? Do they? You talk about the representation of the Egyptian people versus the Egyptian bourgeoisie, and talk about the comprador nature of governments like Egypt and so on.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it has to do just with like defined trade interests and military power projection. So you get, in the Egyptian case, like the United States is a primary funder of the Egyptian military, and the Egyptian military, in and of itself, has like its own distinct class interest in a sense, right? Yep. So the Egyptian military basically dictates a lot of the political reality in Egypt. We saw that with the Arab Spring movement. Part of the reason why the quasi-revolutionary government was kind of ousted after a short time was because of like an inability of actually being able to like come to the table, and the U.S. Threatening to cut off funding for the Egyptian military, which led to Egyptian military higher ups basically like saying "fuck it, we're not doing that." A lot of it is also strong arming. You know, in the Egyptian case, like post Nasser, like it's always been kind of just messy. You know, and that's not really reflected in the will of the Egyptian people, right? It's a very diverse group. But it's a matter of like electoral suppression mixed with like general military strong arming that's kind of kept the reality in the way it is. I'm not as well versed in Egyptian politics, admittedly, but the military in Egypt plays a massive role in maintaining a sort of semblance of order, and which more often than not just means more alignment with Western powers. Jordan is a little weirder. Their legacy is more like European colonialism. And this kind of like propped up Hashemite government, which is like a monarchy within Jordan, that has been more or less thoroughly propped up by the West and is normalized more or less with the Israelis for a long time. They're also like Jordanians themselves are mixed, and in fact, like the PFLP was engaged in factional disputes with other parts of Jordan in a short civil war that the PFLP unfortunately lost. But like there's a lot to be said there as well about political diversity. Broadly, it's like a rule of thumb. Like Arab majority countries tend to be pro-Palestine on the ground, especially as far as the general populace, because it's considered a colonial struggle. It's considered like Israel's ambitions territorially and otherwise extend far beyond historic Palestine. So like Syrians understand threat. Lebanese people understand the threat. Egyptians understand the threat because they've gone through successive wars and conflicts with Israel, and have also like seen their land quite literally stolen by Israeli forces. In Jordan, you kind of get that sense as well. It's like this general kind of like unifying element amongst like working class, amongst like proletarian Arab populations, even in Iraq and Afghanistan, etc. Governments, it's it again from like a Marxist analysis, you have these bourgeois governments full of essentially compradors in some instances, but also full of just like their own they're pursuing their own material and national interests, and those interests oftentimes align with Western capital, and Western capital backs Israel. So it's it's like a 3-step process, right? Like it's like the U.S. is going to give me money if I normalize. That's why the Saudis have been negotiating so damn long over normalization. It's because they understand that they can get a lot of concessions from U.S. empire through normalization officially. With it's why the Abraham Accords have been pushed so aggressively. The Egyptian case as well, like the U.S. basically gave the Egyptian military and gave the Egyptian political establishment massive concessions to sign like the Abraham Accords, to sign like these Camp David Accords that would give that aligned Egypt a lot more with Israel. And that's it's a basic thing, right? If you want to get money from imperialists, you work hand in hand with the imperialist outpost in your region, right? Same with AFRICOM in different contexts.
Yep.
But maybe that answers the question. I'm sorry.
Perfect.
Yep.
We just like listening to you talk, man.
Yep.
No, I appreciate that. I feel like I ramble.
No, you're good. I know.
I love a good ramble.
Yeah, it's good rambling. We have I love when we get people on that I think all of us as a collective have some knowledge about this, but it's great when we have guests on that are more focused on one particular thing, and in this case this conflict. And
absolutely,
we tend to be
indulge my niche interest.
We tend to be more generalist.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to have like a specialist.
No, that's the whole point. We want to put people on who know. I know you said 45 minutes. You have time for a question in the chat, or?
I'm chilling. Yeah, I got more time. Like
we got fed. We got fed.
Howdy. How
Hi.
you doing?
Anyway. All right, we have.
We're gonna edit
come together.
Hell yeah!
We have been under attack from the woke CIA, but we've recovered.
Something similar happened when we had Eddie on. By that time, it wasn't my fault. It just turned off.
Mossad's being fucking assholes.
So what happened there was like there were 2 Ivans for a second.
Hell yeah.
Yep. So it was my doppelganger. Really got me.
Well, tell that one to keep quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Settle down.
You see that door back there? That's where he came out of. Yep. You go back and watch the footage, you'll see the door open slightly, and I just like slam the thing to turn it off. Yeah. But
so
yeah, the Israeli occupation forces haven't invaded. That's what our friend
Joe was
talking about.
Yeah, and I think there's multiple things to that. I think probably one of it is just Israeli overall military morale. Also coupled with the fact that it's this contradiction that they have where they can't be too violent because it actually just aggravates both Palestinian national sentiments as well as like general international support for their project. And that kind of has been an ever-present problem. But with with an increasingly fascist, I mean, it's always fascist, but with an increasingly fascistic, farther right government than normal, that calculation is probably a little bit less, a little bit less in the mix. I think one of the bigger hindrances is the fact that they might have like 50,000 to 100,000 Lebanese soldiers sitting on their fucking border, like waiting for them to overcommit. And I think they're very aware of that fact, because the Iron Dome is like really good against like crude rockets, not as good against like high-tech Iranian missiles.
Yeah, like a cruise missile.
Yeah, right. Shit just doesn't work the same. So I really think that part of it is Israel recognizes that like if they overcommit in Gaza and have to put thousands of soldiers into that, their northern front is not able to be easily reinforced against like a potential incursion by Hezbollah, which in Lebanese army, which like, really probably would like to reclaim the Galilee. So it's like it's a whole thing. So I think that's more their thing. And I think that, again, to me, that explains why it's one explanation of many of why the United States is so desperate to get as many carrier groups into the Mediterranean Ocean as they can, Mediterranean Sea as they can, is probably because like they recognize that like their major weak point is that they actually could very well get invaded from the north. It's actually part of why like Palestinian resistance groups were able to break out of Gaza was that Israel's calculation was that like North or West Bank would be the areas where you're starting to see more of a flare up. So they overcommitted soldiers into the West Bank, into the North, and now they've had to like realign a lot of their deployment because they were like, oh shit, right, the open air prisons there.
Yeah.
And
like, presumably they didn't want to like just move one piece to another location. They needed new pieces, which is why they called up 300,000 reserve.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also like it's important to note too that like there were a lot of protests going on internally in Israel. Or so-called Israel, and a lot of those protests were leading to Air Force officers and other military officers kind of going on strike essentially, which led to a decreased readiness of like Israeli military assets that might have also played a role. And that's kind of fun, I love it when the fascists are infighting. It's great. But like that's always a fun thing too, is like just like the different strains of Zionist like leadership within Israeli society. But yeah, I think the mixture of all of those factors probably led to Israel's unpreparedness generally, along with general imperial hubris that you see with all of these powers eventually. But yeah, they're probably just not invading for those factors, and also just be incredibly costly. The Israeli economy is already not doing too hot, just like due to like their currency devaluation, or not really full devaluation, but the currency's like dropped. Since the beginning of this, they're seeing settlers fleeing back to where they fucking came from, which is awesome. And you're starting to see this whole like shift in a lot of their general security. Like Hamas and the other resistance groups were actually very successful in that they shattered the Israeli like concept of like invincibility. They very much showed that like, no, we can actually come get you.
they made them afraid for like the first time in a really long time.
I mean, there's a reason why I saw some number that like 90% of the settlers that like fled the Gaza envelope, which is like where a lot of the settlements that got liberated were, are like not wanting to return, which is hilarious.
It's like why am I going to go back if that's going to happen? Like, nope.
Well, a lot of them were really, really pissed off because like a lot of those frontier settlers, or not just like frontier settlers, maybe not the best word for the 48 territory settlers, but a lot of these settlers who were in these areas were, from my understanding, like, Ben Gvir is like their kind of rep. And a lot of the internal coalition arrangements were to get those frontier settlements more like security, more military assets, because they felt like for years as if that might be a problem. And so for a lot of them, they're really pissed because they're like, we've been saying this shit was going to happen, which I think is funny, because like fuck them, right? But like it's entertaining that they're all like there's a lot of protests in Israel. And they're goofy because the Israelis are like, how did intelligence fail? And it's like, well, fuckers, I don't know. Like maybe you shouldn't set up a tent next to an open air prison. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that in my analysis too was there must have been people within the IOF who were sympathetic, who knew that something was going to happen, and they just didn't say anything.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I don't know. In the Gazan context, I don't know, because Hamas has been so thoroughly demonized that like I think Israelis don't even view like Palestinians in Gaza as like human. But there's always a shot. Yeah, I think I also chalk a lot up to it to like just like imperial hubris. Like they're like, oh, how the fuck could they ever do that, right? And then it happens, and you're like, oh shit, okay, cool.
Yeah, right. Egypt is like, this shit's gonna happen in 3 days, and you're like, what are you talking about, bro? No,
like fuck you. It's actually a fun fact. Like I remember like years ago, I think I read that like in 73, like before the Egyptians and the Syrians crossed over and like liberated a lot of territory. It was really funny because I think the Jordanian, like a member of the Jordanian royal family, like was trying to warn the Israelis that like that was going to happen, and they were like, like it's great how these things just cycles. It's
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just love it when Israeli military planners fuck up because it just leads to some awesome outcomes.
Absolutely.
But,
I mean, I feel like they're not really super successful, like as far as like definitely on the ground, because they're super like casualty averse. Like they're literally they're like legitimately afraid of like a fighter on fighter conflict. Like they're fine with essentially being police, being cops for an unarmed populace. But as soon as the populace is armed against them, suddenly they're like, all right, everybody pull back. We're going to use our aircraft and artillery.
It was a prank, bro. It was a prank.
Because like that's even in like the the war that they won, the only reason why they did was because they were able to disrupt supply lines and take out the enemy's air forces. Like it wasn't necessarily that their fighters were better on the ground. In fact, they were not. They were not better. It was just that the people that they were going up against didn't have supplies to like maintain their defensive positions. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and that's the funny thing about the Israeli military. It's like this myth of like holy shit, look how good we are, and it's like y'all have a shit record. Like when you really look at it, like y'all. I mean, like congratulations, you beat unarmed villagers. Good shit. Okay, but like every time they meet like a serious military adversary that's like not explicitly on their terms, they get their shit rocked. Like 73 is a good example. 08's a good example. Like they ran with their tails between their legs out of fucking southern Lebanon. And it's actually like, a fun fact, like Israeli military suicide rates like spiked after like 08, after they all came home from Lebanon. And I think part of that has to be that they just like this invincibility rhetoric just failed to exist.
Yeah. I mean, they have a really good Air Force, and that is it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they have a super technologically advanced Air Force. Like I think they have like something like 6 of the like best generation like fighters. Like they have 6 wings. But like that's all they have.
And some of them are nuclear equipped too, so it's a whole other fucking element of Israeli history. But yeah, they're like they're new gen fighters, new gen bombers, etc., UAVs, things like that. With like really serious hardware, which that's what you get when your best friend is the single largest imperialist power in the entire world, right?
Yeah,
right.
And that's what you need when you're casualty averse and you're afraid of a fair fight. You know what I mean?
Like,
I was gonna say,
yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, like when you said casualty adverse, and I think Yudi said use artillery and whatever. It reminds me of the U.S. doctrine, where they don't not really prepared to go mano and mano with actual standing militaries, which is why I'm not a military expert, obviously, but I think that if I ran fully committed to the defense of Gaza, that I think the United States really wouldn't know what to do, because yeah, we can get a shooting war with their planes and missiles and stuff, but when it comes to, again, like the prospect of sending American troops to die one-on-one against Iranian troops or Russian or Chinese, it doesn't fly, and it doesn't fly at home. I mean, and I observed that even when I was a child, learning about Iraq and Afghanistan, that like every time an American soldier died, I remember like it was like such a big fucking deal. Like the news would be like 3 Americans died today. And I remember being like 3, like really,
yeah,
like yeah, that sucks, I guess, for us, but like that's like rookie numbers. I don't understand. And
I think the U.S. like in total throughout the Afghani occupation, like over that 20 years, lost about 5,000 troops.
Yeah,
total.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
And the U.S., I can tell you, Jake, like firsthand, they are not prepared for any kind of major conflict, and they will avoid it at all costs. The U.S., they'll do war games constantly, and the U.S. almost always loses, and they have to change the rules. They have to change the rules of the war games in order to win, so that they look better.
Yeah.
Like,
I think why do you think they're trying so hard on social media to glaze up their?
Yeah.
You've got these e-girl
the military e-girls.
Basically. Israel does the same thing with the military e-girls.
Oh yeah.
And it's not working, but it's it's how it shows how desperate they are.
I remember
Israeli military propaganda is like the funniest shit ever when you like analyze it and you're just like, what the fuck? Like you see the videos of them and like videos on like TikTok and shit, and you're like, because you have to sit here and recognize like the Israeli military is like paying like big bucks for this to happen, and it's like, okay, like that's where my $3 billion a year funding from the United States is going towards. It's like fucking TikTok.
You like watch like you see them talk about their military, they're like, we're invincible. We're the best military ever. We've never lost a conflict. And then you look at their ad, and it's just like an e-girl being like, "Ooh, Will, you should join the Israeli military."
Well, a lot of it's really insidious because it's like this feminization of military assets, right? They're like, it's like a honeypot in a lot of ways for.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it also like distracts from a lot of the really gruesome horrors of the Israeli military, right? Because you're like, oh, well, how could she do that, right?
Yeah,
it's like the
cute cat girls. They wouldn't do war crimes.
But also, like, it's really interesting. Like, I haven't done any research on this, so I don't know how like legitimate it is. But I've heard a lot of like instances of like, young Jewish men going on like birthright and like falling in love with like an IDF soldier or something, right? And like that's like what gets them over there. Like, and that's like crazy. Right, like, because that level of like propaganda is just absurd, right? But like, it's like literally just honeypotting people into like joining a fascist occupation force, which is crazy.
You know, like H3H3, right?
I was about to bring them up.
Like that's literally what happened. Like, bro went over there on birthright and then fell in love with an Israeli soldier. And they're literally married. Like
specifically in the I know that story. Like it was specifically in the Holocaust Museum too, where they fell in love, which was like just an interesting story that they tell.
Maybe not really where I would go on a first date.
Right, like it's really no. I just heard a story that supposedly that person, the wife, because her job in the IDF was a desk job or whatever, was bored one day and decided to go on one of the raids in Gaza to just experience it. And it's like,
oh, sick.
Did you look at what those raids are? And it's like, oh yeah, sick, bro. You beat up a 12-year-old, and shot his grandma. Like, Jesus Christ, dude. Like,
I wish.
I don't.
The things I wish, man. The things I can't say publicly.
The things that
the things I leave for the after show.
Put it in the show notes.
I was talking to my brother, and he brought up a good point to me. And this is not my we love Putin endorsement, but he was making a point. He goes, like the West's propaganda always says, like Putin is destroying Ukraine. Putin's gonna bulldoze all these places. And it, in a way, what happened this past weekend kind of really proves Russia's own military doctrine in the Ukraine, because they're, at least what they've said on paper, is that they move very methodically. They try to avoid civilian casualties, infrastructure, whatever. So they're just moving very slowly over time. And I mean, they blew the hell out of Mariupol, but they were doing that to get the Yazis out of the fucking factory they were hiding there. And the Western media doesn't talk about how they've rebuilt Mariupol at this point. But now we're seeing what Israel do to Gaza, that what people said Russia would do to Kiev. And it also goes to show you that in terms of military, because one, obviously the Russian military is bigger, has more money, maybe not as advanced technology, but more technology.
Yeah, like per soldier, it's not as advanced, but you know, it definitely has a better distribution of resources.
Right. So if they really want to, and they've shown that they could, strike all these cities in the interior of the Ukraine, they could just do the same fucking thing that Israel's doing to Gaza right now, and they don't. So I'm not justifying this one way or another, but it just goes to show you again, you need to pay attention to who is talking, who is doing the propaganda, what is their biases. And it just goes to show that the West is objectively wrong. Like,
oh yeah, consistently. Yeah, it is admittedly really funny seeing the just blatant hypocrisy shifting from like Ukraine straight over to Palestine. Like it's hypocrisy that you come to expect, right? Because like when you're a communist, like you just know that's coming, right?
Yeah.
But like it's still crazy, the 180 of like, oh my God, look at what Russia's doing, and it's like, oh no, like the Israelis can do genocide, that's fine. Like sure.
And it's crazy too, because like they'll be like, and the Russians, they took over this area in Donetsk, right? And then like you know, a Ukrainian will fire a shot into Donetsk, and they're like, see, they're reclaiming their territory. Right,
like,
but they, you know, if this was the inverse, they're like, Russia's defending themselves by invading Ukraine. Like,
my favorite's like when liberals talk about Crimea, and it's like, yo, let me tell you about the Golan Heights. This shit's crazy. You're gonna like lose your shit.
Yeah, you're gonna go bananas.
Right.
Let's just say in Crimea, most of the people that were there before are still there. But the Golan Heights,
that's a tricky one. You know, it's and they're like, you know, the funny thing for me is like the last couple of days is like the violence on both sides rhetoric that we've really been seeing. And it's like, all right, like let's contextualize that real quick, right? Because I didn't see violence on both sides shit happening when Russia was invading Ukraine. Like I sure as shit thought we picked a team there. And it's interesting to see how that kind of liberal nonviolence rhetoric gets like like basically just waters down decolonial struggles. Like I would have loved to see what these people thought about the IRA. Like genuinely
get a security off.
No, for real, you're gonna make me go crazy. You know, like your special interest is Palestine, mine is Ireland. So
oh hell yeah, I'm reading Our Struggle right now.
It's the exact same way. You know, I'm a little older, so at 41, I remember when the IRA was still sort of a topical thing when it existed, and they treated the IRA the same way they treat Hamas, same way.
Yeah.
The liberals, both wings of the State Department, they treated the IRA as just brutal terrorists, and that the British were, oh well, you know, what's happened between them is not great, but gosh, you can't fight back like that.
They're just trying to restore order.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and that's why it's so easy for me to sympathize with Palestine, because like I already know this information about Ireland, and the fact that like Northern Ireland was literally a settler colonial project where they got rid of the Irish people that were there, replaced them with Scots Irish, right? Which is just, you know, Germanized Scottish people.
Yeah.
And like,
give me a quick second. I got to text my girlfriend back.
Yeah.
Hold on.
No, you good.
And they got like the whole apartheid system that was there for a fucking super long time. And like, you know, you could still argue that it's occurring today because there's literally like segregation of communities.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, the IRA, it wasn't like, you know, there wasn't just one IRA, just like there isn't just Hamas. There was the provisional IRA, the real IRA, like
the new
the
IRA.
original IRA, like all sorts of different fucking names for like the same goddamn people. Know what I mean?
Yeah.
No,
I mean, I think this whole group, you know, we all have our own just natural sympathy, but also like, you know, our own ethnic ties or religious ties to, you know, how we can see ourselves and our own people in the struggle that the Palestinians are going through. You know, me being the hodgepodge of Latino America, I mean, just throw a fucking dart at the map and I could be like, yeah, these rebels here and there and there and there. You know, I'm here because my parents are refugees from Guatemala, James. And I'm here directly in the United States because of the actions of the United States. And I've told this story before, so just like real fast, like I started to realize the real difference in like the definition of whiteness when I was in high school and the Latino refugee crisis got worse. And as more people who were my age from the same place that I have visited, because I had been to the country several times, were getting, you know, either beat up in school or their kids were, you know, calling them slurs and stuff, but they were saying it to me like, oh, this kid's a this kid's a that. And I'm like, bro, we're the same. What are you talking about? I just happen to be born here, but like we come from the same village. Like, what do you mean, dude? Like, just I don't have enough of an accent for you, but like I was born in Connecticut, bro. Like, I don't know what you want me to do, you know, and you see how these people are treated all throughout the world. And of course, as communists, and as you begin to understand really what imperialism is, you see that, and you just, you know, like we were saying before the show, you know, like at least for me, like I just can't help every now and again, like I just start crying, like I don't know, you know, it's just terrible. Lot. But in a slightly, you know, lighter hearted note, I want to know, because obviously the internet is on fire. If on the fly, and you could have to think about it, it's fine. But what is some of the worst takes you've heard about this whole situation? So do you got one, or?
There's just so fucking many. Shit. I don't know. Like, the Israeli propaganda have honestly been so uniquely bad as of late. Like broadly, like I've been seeing a lot of communists be like, this is why we need a 2-state solution. And I'm like, motherfucker, do you not like understand?
We do need a 2-state solution, James. Ireland and Palestine.
No, literally.
Come on.
That's always,
two Palestine?
Two Palestine seems excessive, but if that's what the people want, then, you know, I'll go for it.
I had a friend of mine once. He was one of my good friends. I work with him. He was like, no, I'm cool with 2-state solution. Like a very strong, militarily dominant Palestine and a weak, fragmented Israel sounds fucking hilarious.
Like complete opposite.
Yeah,
right. I love that. I think for me, again, I made a video on this today.
Yeah.
Was this person? I don't know who they are. I don't know their name. Whatever, Hispanic-looking guy, who made a video basically saying that like queer people shouldn't support Hamas or Palestine because those people want to kill you.
I love that.
And I'm like, bro, and I said this last chat, like, okay, so like, you know, if, you know, okay, I'm getting married to a man, and it's like we're in Palestine and Gaza and we have our wedding. We finally got LGBTQ rights from the Palestinian authorities, and then an Israeli bomb comes and wipes out our wedding. Is that the equality that you want? Like, we cannot talk about these things. We cannot move society forward while the boots of imperialism is on these people's neck. I'm sorry. These people in general, they might not really want to fucking talk about that. And I'm sure they are talking about it. You're just making assumptions about a group of people because the news told you to. And don't get me wrong. Cutie said this last chat. Israel doesn't care about LGBTQ rights of Palestinians because they don't care about Palestinians.
Yeah. And it also, like, the statement presupposes that, like, Israel gives a fuck about, like, the sanctity of marriage in the sense that, like, they're okay with anybody getting married. But, like, a non-Jew cannot marry a Jew when they can, like, they're not allowed to live in the same house if they're married to each other.
That's why.
And, like, if I'm, to my knowledge, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, James, but it is illegal. Like, you know, same-sex marriage is literally illegal in Israel anyways.
Yeah, they like, it's because they don't do secular marriages. It's actually really interesting. they will recognize same-sex marriages done abroad. So like a lot of like Israelis will like go to like Cyprus and like get married and then come back. But like you can't get married in Israel because or in so-called Israel because they only do religious marriages and just fucking none of them do it.
I like that so-called.
Yeah, it's like it's really fucked actually, because it's like they will like if you're a settler, right? If you're like two gay guys from Brooklyn, like you can move into a house that's like been ethnically cleansed in the middle of like Gaza, or like in the middle of like the outskirts of the Gaza envelope, right? But like if you're a Palestinian who's like in Tel Aviv, like or like if you're a Palestinian like the West Bank, you can't even like you don't have basic human rights. You live under an apartheid structure, right? Like Israelis don't give a shit if you're gay or not, because you're Palestinian, you're an animal to them, right? Like so, they just said a minute ago. Pinkwashing is so funny to me. Like funny, like absurd. You know what I mean? Because it's like, oh yeah, like I'm sure, like the apartheid is fine. Like I'm sure, like I'm sure, like the decades of ethnic cleansing campaigns are definitely like, you know, they're bad. But have you considered that like it's harder to be like gay in Gaza? Which is funny because like gay marriage is like legal, like, or like gay like the West Bank, I believe, has like more comprehensive like LGBTQ protections than like Tel Aviv, which is funny, like if I'm remembering that correctly. But it's like I just don't get the argument. I think it's funny. I just love the it's this imposition. This what is it called? Imposition. Right, of like you as an individual, like, well, I wouldn't feel comfortable in Gaza, and it's like, well, I okay, like, what do you want me to do about that?
Right, like, yeah. Well, you're not in Gaza. Are you in Gaza? Are you it's settling like, in Gaza? Like, what?
Like, I hate to be the guy.
If you don't feel comfortable there, don't go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turns their so-called solidarity into a transactional status that you know,
literally
they care very much
Someone
about
in the chat.
people.
Someone
as
in the chat
as the oppressed people, you know, align in every single way with their privileged position, and not to mention that, you know, this place that they live in now has only very recently, our national bourgeoisie has only very recently really kind of started to turn the other way when people are fucking, right?
Only
whenever I see like Americans saying it, I'm like, you know, Obergefell wasn't that fucking long ago, right?
Yeah.
You know the quote from like Germany where it's like, first they came for the communists and I said nothing because I was not a communist. I saw something where it was kind of like a play on that, and they were like, I stood with Black Lives Matter in 2015 and 2020. I stood by the LGBTQ community and blah, 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 blah. I protested with this group, and then when I was attacked, you did not stand with me.
Was that the Amy Schumer thing?
Yeah. I'll pull it up right now.
Is that literally? I saw it. I didn't even recognize it as Amy.
That is the worst take. That's the worst take I've seen.
That's definitely one of them. I think the worst take is definitely like people saying that the Pope should call like a 9th crusade to reclaim the kingdom of Jerusalem.
Oh yeah, I've seen a weird amount of TikToks like that actually.
Like that one is like fucking crazy.
My For You page is weird as hell because like I'll get TikToks like that where it's like a slideshow of like a dude like Patrick Bateman like just like staring like stoically at like Palestine, Israel, and then it like flips over and it's like just like straight up like Christo fascist shit. I don't know how it gets on my For You page.
Yeah,
but it's like Kingdom of Jerusalem. Yeah, it's like where the fuck did this come from? It's got like 100,000 likes. Like what the hell?
Your guys' For You page is way different bite.
Yeah,
it like cuts to like, you know, it's just soy Wojaks for both of them. It's like, no, Palestine is mine. And it's like, no, it's Israel. And the next one is like ... and it's like a fucking, it's the dude with the like the mask, the guy that has like leprosy in the kingdom. And he's like standing there with like a fucking sword and shit. And it's just like in the background it's the kingdom of Jerusalem, and it's got like some fucking music where it's like like some Sigma music in the background. You're like, Jesus fucking Christ, bro.
My For You page is always really like weird because it's nothing but like fish and aquarium content, or it's like or Palestine now, or it's like Christo-fascist propaganda, and I haven't really figured out why those are the three for me. As a communist Muslim, I really struggle with that third one.
I'm gonna say,
but yeah, it's weird.
Cutie, I have the quote from
yes,
the
please.
ever unfunny.
Can you read it to me? Can you read it to me in like the most intense way possible?
First, they came for the LGBTQ, and I stood up because love is love. Then they came for immigrants, and I stood up because families belong together. Then they came for the Black community, and I stood up because Black Lives Matter. Then they came for me, but I stood alone because I am a Jew. Like, what?
That's fucking crazy.
Like, what are you talking about?
Like, bro, you are a white woman living in the United States of America right now. You have millions of dollars, bro.
You know who else
come for you? Like,
you know who else stood with BLM? Palestinians.
Yeah.
Exactly. And no, you don't stand up for immigrants because there's literally concentration camps on the border right now.
Right.
None of you motherfuckers talking about it. So
my thing, like, also, I think more people hate Amy Schumer because of her comedy than her being Jewish. Genuinely, I think. Sure.
She's using her Jewishness as scapegoat for herself, bro.
For her shit comedy, yeah.
Even among the rightoids, it's like woman,
not funny.
Woman, not funny. Like those are the reasons they hate her. Like Jew is way down. I
didn't even know Amy Schumer was Jewish until like 3 days ago. If I'm being totally honest, like
right. What do you think it is?
It threw me off. I was like, oh fuck, really? All right.
Exactly.
I was like, cool.
But let's not forget that the first line of that actual quote is first they came for the communists. So like,
yeah. How that got left out.
Yeah,
exactly.
Petty bourgeois ass is not standing with us. Trust me.
No, not at all. Oh my god. I think in terms of just the other like terrible worst takes ever, of course, coming from the Israeli government, calling them animals. That's crazy. Wow.
Straight up.
That's out in the open.
Literally one of them put like a whole picture where it was like an IDF boot stepping on a cockroach. Like there's literally Yahtzee propaganda that looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
Speaking of,
the president said the president was like, there are no civilians in Gaza. If they wanted to not be like complicit, they would have overthrown the Hamas. And it's like, dude, you're being really out in the open about this in a way that you probably shouldn't be if this is your goal here.
You're like, your PR team is losing their fucking minds reading this tweet right now.
No, because like I haven't seen rhetoric like that since like Serbia in the 90s, right? Like with like Milosevic and all them being like, no, like these are the Turkish invaders that we're gonna slaughter en masse, and everybody was like, oh, okay.
It's wild that they can so openly and so blatantly say stuff like that.
Yeah.
And liberals are just like, no, it's
CNN's like, that's fair. Like self-defense.
I mean, yeah, I guess they got a point.
Fair and unbiased. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
God damn. This is from the Prime Minister of Israel, tweeter. This is a struggle between the children of light and the children of darkness, between humanity and the law of the jungle. Boy, what? You did not say jungle. Law of the jungle? You gotta be fucking with me, bro.
That one's crazy because it's just like you could have torn that like straight out of Mein Kampf and like it would have made so much sense.
I mean, it's also like just needlessly like trying to be poetic. Like they're trying to make like he's trying to like make a statement of something beautiful, like the children of the light are gonna smite the children of the like what?
Yeah, because they're mostly children.
What? No, for
like,
real.
You're talking about smiting children, no matter how you phrase
literally.
It.
Yeah, I feel like you've lost the game, right? Like I mean, you've lost the propaganda war when you're like openly being like, no, we're killing kids. Like you're done. But
and like this is on Twitter, dude. Like like let's be real. Let's say
fucking
that like
wild.
Let's say that like what they're saying is true, right? That like all this propaganda is true. why in the actual fuck is this dude like writing on like, do you not have more pressing things to deal with right now than write like a poetic statement about how you're gonna crush your enemies and like fucking righteous fury or some shit? Like, what the hell are you doing, bro? Like
it's like, yeah, sir, this is a Denny's. Like, I don't like
literally. And the Denny's doesn't belong to you.
I think part of it too is
Denny's is actually a fucking is a Waffle House. Like, it's an occupied Waffle House.
Like, I just think it's great. So like the thing too, so this is an interesting side note. Like, so I studied like genocide studies a little bit in college as a part of my minor, and it's always really fascinating because like a large part of genocide studies is around like how do we define genocide per a relevant UN convention, right? Because like there's like, you know, definitions that you can utilize to like guide what a genocide is, but like everyone uses the official UN convention. And like a big part of the UN convention, and what makes it so tricky to prosecute genocides is that like there's just not intent. Like you have to have an intent. Like intent is a major element of like how you do genocide proceedings. And the Israelis are just putting that shit down on paper. Like it's like you, like if y'all ever get tried, like you were fucked. Like, you know, that's what fucked a lot of the Germans in Nuremberg. But it's also like it's why it's so tricky to be able to prosecute perpetrators, because you don't know, like, oh, was this person like doing this because they wanted to commit genocide, or did they just like kill a couple of people, right? But like the Israelis are like, no, like we're doing genocide. Like that is like that's our explicit goal. Like
we are here for genocide.
Yeah,
I want to make sure that no one is confused.
Like
the Jaffa trials or some shit, bro.
People 60 years from now are gonna look back at this and be like, "What the fuck were they saying?"
That's actually something I was thinking about the other day, where it's like I'm sure you've all heard it growing up. I certainly heard it all the time, where it's like people questioning how the German population could allow something like the Holocaust to happen. Or like what they would have done if they were back in that time. Like, oh, you know, I would have stood up and said something, even if it was the wrong thing. It's like, well, now you are in that position. You're in that position you have claimed you would stand up in, and you're not. You're showing to everyone that you would not have stood up during the Holocaust. You would have just let it happen.
And they always counter that with, well, but they're not doing it here to us. And that's what I always have to point out, that only 3% of the Holocaust or less happened on German soil. So you can't say, well, it's different because they did it in their own backyard. No, overwhelmingly they did fucking not.
It's like they literally went to other people's backyards to make it even bigger than it was. Like, yeah, exactly.
Poland, Soviet Union, Hungary, the Baltics. That was the heaviest of the atrocities of the Third Reich. It was not in Germany.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the Jewish people that were in Germany, they like left to Poland.
Yes.
They weren't like taken out immediately, like straight away.
Right.
It was after, like, you know, obviously it was before too, but like primarily it was after they invaded Poland.
Right. Yeah. I think it just goes to show more and more evidence in the modern setting why liberals don't side with the communists. They never do. They side with the fascists. And we're seeing it now because, you know, the people who are most outwardly outspoken right now are obviously the people who are in the suffering, Hamas, and communists. You know, but and I think what we're going to see, and at least maybe I'm just being hopeful, is an increased radicalization, because I'm seeing a lot of accounts that are new of people who are like, hey, I never made a video before, but what the fuck, and then they're blowing up, and I mean, they're coming onto my FYP. I think they're coming to a lot of our FYPs, and you know, it's like an introduction, like, hey, you have a problem with this? Well, there's something that goes behind that can propel us post the society of imperialism. So like, you know, I think hopefully that is one of the only good things that we could take out of this, is that the world is watching. You know, people are still talking about it a week later. People are going to be radicalized. For a lot of people, we're going to see very soon who enter our circles. They're going to say, you know, what was your radicalization? Before, it was a lot of it was COVID. Now I think a lot of people are going to say it was the 2023 genocide of Palestine.
Yeah.
Inshallah. Yeah, I mean, I hope so. But yeah, that being said, I gotta get going, guys, because I gotta eat dinner or else.
That's okay. You've literally gone on for double the time you said you were.
Yeah.
I lose track of time. I just like talking. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what.
Thanks for coming on. I'm super appreciative. Yeah. Yeah. You know, and if you ever want to come back or whatever, you know, just let us know.
Yeah. Anytime, man. I would love to. It'd be fun.
Cool. Yeah. If you ever want to post something on the YouTube, go for it. You know, just let us know, and you know, we'll just keep it moving. But thanks a lot for coming.
Of course. All right, I'll talk to y'all later. I'm gonna get going. I'm making chicken tonight. I'm very excited.
Cool. Nice. Exciting.
Very hyped. All right, I'll talk to y'all later.
All right, bye.
Thanks.
Wow, that was really cool.
That was really cool.
But let's say bye to the homies and then chit chat.
Yeah.
Later, y'all.
Goodbye, chat. We love you.
Not the gang sign. That one. Jesus Christ. Oh my God.
Those are my IRA gang signs.
I love it. That would be a profile picture for you. Bye.